And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Door Stuck, a CSGO weekly show starring myself and Mr. MagicHelmet, also known as Mitchell Langford. Mitch, how you doing on this wonderful, I guess I shouldn't say rainy week because it's rainy here, but you're not in this area. You're in Chicago.
Yeah. You know what? I'm great. And I feel like the weather that I get, one day you guys typically get the next day, whether it's, 12 hours, 18, something like that. So I got a little bit of that yesterday. I mean, it's not really much different today. It's overcast, typical Chicago. I've been hoping for some sunshine and some warmth, like combined on one day, but it hasn't really happened all that much yet. So I'm hoping that turns around. But otherwise been good. I got compliments in the company, the sweet Zip gaming chair. So it's been fun to build it out, and I've enjoyed it so far. So thanks to NSG and Zip Chair for that. We got some spicy topics to go with today, whether it's major rankings or some ESL 1 related stuff. So let's do it, Mark.
Yeah, so for those of you that haven't been paying attention to the most recent news in Counter-Strike, there's a few different things going on. Obviously, we now know how some of the Road to Rio stuff is going to work. We have an understanding of the ranking system. And while that was going to be the topic, it was really important to us. At the same point in time, there's another thing that's equally as important to discuss because it takes hold very quickly. There is a game that is about to be competed that is affected by this very thing we're going to be talking about, and that would be the current conflicts of interest in Road to Rio. That's the qualifier system. So if we take a look here, we'll pull in the HLTV page that talks about it. Initially, it came up because MIBR and we're going to compete in the ESL 1 Road to Rio, and people went, well, wait, that's a problem. You might be saying, why is that a problem? Well, let's scroll down a little bit, and you'll start to understand. Was relaunched in January 2018 by numerous prominent figures, including current MIBR player Taco, team coach Ricardo Dead Sinigaglia, and then current EG coach Zeus. Also, Coldzera, Fallen. These people are involved in the project as either owners or investors to the project. You might be saying, why is that a problem? Well, they're going to be competing against each other potentially in the upcoming Major and Road to Rio qualifying sort of stage. It's hard to really call it a qualifier. It's a weird, don't really know what to call it. It's more of a tournament circuit.
Yep.
So that came up yesterday, among other things. I mean, there was the source leak. That was a problem to many. Obviously, that looked like it was going to be way worse than it was.
Yeah.
But then today, ESL put out that they were going to be evaluating those conflicts of interests, one of which was not mentioned in the original article. So we'll scroll down so you can see that one. You'll see it says Dignitas, Get Right, owns a minority stake in NIP. You might be asking why that's so important today. They play each other in 30 minutes.
Yeah, literally 30 minutes from now. So it's, I don't know if they're going to be able to get a ruling in before that. I have a feeling they're going to go ahead and play that game. So I don't think they're going to be able to overturn that at some point. I think the biggest part is whether or not it's been disclosed to ESL and the public. Just going through this article, that was one of the sticking points is, it's okay as long as all of this information, whether you're an owner, you're an investor, you need to make that information public so the public can discuss whether they, think it's all right or not, and also make sure that ESL knows about it because, there are opportunities for things to go wrong. People, we assume all these people are doing everything above board and, there's not going to be any funny business on the back end. I mean, these are big name players and coaches within the CS scene. I think everybody that we can trust that wouldn't do anything they shouldn't, but there is potential for conflict of interest there. So, ESL just wants to make sure everybody knows who's invested in what companies and what teams. And it looks like they're going to go through that process now when they have this investigation. But just based on the article, it seems like all that information had been disclosed, at least to ESL 1 and the forms that they request whenever players sign up for these events. But whether or not that was put out into the public domain, I'm not sure. I personally haven't really dug into that. I don't know if you have, Mark, but nonetheless, I mean, these are guys that we trust. We don't think there's going to be anything funny going on the back end, but you can just imagine some of the scenarios that might come into play. Maybe if it's a lower tier team or just, anybody that's not these bigger name players where, you're going up against a team that, you may be trying to build up the name for Gaming. and your team hasn't been playing very well, you might give them, a few extra rounds to make them look better, or, potentially worse than that, you can throw the game so that team can have a better opportunity to get some shine on the CS stage. And, obviously that's not what I'm thinking. That's not what I'm saying, but the potential is there.
I mean, this is something that ESL made a ruling about years ago regarding academy team. Academy teams, this was in 2017, and we can even pull up that article because I had honestly forgotten about it until just now. ESL had made a ruling about how academy teams would play into things when it came time for qualifying for Pro League. So if you were an academy team competing in the Mountain Dew League, there was a concern because once you made it out of the Mountain Dew League, you would be competing against the team that you were the academy of. Like, you could have CLG Academy who was competing at that level. If they made it into Pro League and then they play CLG, that is a huge conflict of interest. The two teams owned by the same company. And then there was a massive ruling in regards to teams owning multiple teams. In fact, it led to people selling off shares of teams because they were working in other portions of esports. And I'm pretty sure Lurpus was one of those people. Lurpus had some stake in ENCE as a team, but then was working full-time for Immortals Gaming Group and MIBR and that whole thing. So that's a conflict of interest. And the concern is, like you said, you could throw rounds to make the team look better. You could throw whole games because it doesn't matter potentially. It's inconsequential to the one team's brand compared to the other. You could forfeit games or not even compete in an event knowing that your sister company or your sister team was going to be competing in that event. It definitely opens the door to many scenarios where one team could take advantage of the other or vice versa.
Yeah, and I mean, I understand the premise of why they would want to invest in these companies and be owners. I mean, it's something that they really believe in. They really want to help build their own team. So maybe eventually they join that team itself and help build it up from the ground up. But yeah, there's certainly some conflict of interest here. And it's certainly got to be cleared up, I think, for the public domain, just to make sure everybody knows what's going on at the back end. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the Dig match goes now, just because it's a little bit more spicy. But just in general, that matchup, I mean, Dignitas, the old NIP that everybody knows, playing against their former team, that's a good match either way. So adding that extra little layer to it makes it a little bit more fun to watch. But yeah, I'm interested to see what ends up, what's the result of that investigation that comes from ESL. I imagine that's probably going to be done pretty quickly, unless there's a lot of different documentation that has to be made and that has to be sourced from these players and these teams. But I imagine that'll be done somewhat quickly.
So here's the thing. I would imagine that this is going to be investigated by ESIC, Esports Integrity Coalition. At least I would assume. So they're going to make sure that everything is on the up and up, and it's probably going to take a while. We will probably have a ruling after most of the matches have already been played, because that's just the way that this goes. It's not a quick process. And there have been times where ESIC was given information and they did nothing. Absolutely nothing. They did not act. They did not enforce a ruling. Let's look at, for instance, the Effies and Cardiac ban from Mountain Dew League a few seasons ago. Those guys never got punished beyond the ban that was placed by ESEA. They were only banned for 2 years, along with Strong Legs, a commentator in the community who was tied to the scandal. And they can say what they want about their innocence or what have you, but it was never really, I think, investigated on that level, which was always a little confusing to me, because you would assume, given the allegations for match fixing, that there would be a higher level sort of investigation that takes place. And this is not an indictment against either two players. I actually like Effies a lot. Was kind of hanging out with them in a lobby the other day when we were doing Valorant content, because he's playing with one of the French Canadian rosters.
I'm glad those guys are back, by the way.
Yeah, they're fun to be around. I don't have anything against them personally, but the reality is that should have probably been looked at a higher level, and it just never got looked at. So I don't know. I don't think we'll see a response from ESL anytime soon, if at all.
Yeah, I mean, they certainly should have some sort of response. I mean, they've already announced that they're going to be doing some sort of investigation. If they don't come out with an announcement as a response to all of this, I mean, that's a little odd. But
Well, do you remember what happened with NIP and all of the players coming out against the brand and making these claims about unpaid prizes and unpaid salaries and all of this malfeasance that was committed at a corporate level within NIP?
yeah,
One of
I
the
do
bigger
remember
names
that.
that was behind it was Fiflaren, and then I think also Freiburg kind of backed him up on that.
Yeah, that
That
was
went
all that and Heat,
nowhere.
right?
That went nowhere. Like, yeah, they investigated it, but it was like kind of a joke. Like it was stated that they would do an investigation with a third party mediator, and 24 hours later, that guy came to a conclusion. There was like 9,000 emails. You telling me that guy read
24
9,000
hours.
emails in 24 hours? Like, get out of here. Everyone knows. I couldn't read 24 emails in 24 hours and actually give like a legitimate breakdown of what I was reading and taking notes and properly vetting it across legal code. There's no way that that investigation was legit. It was sort of like, we're going to do an investigation, quote unquote. You can't even see my hands here. Investigation. And then they just threw out a statement to make it look like something was done in the back end. Or at least that's how it appears to a lot of people in the community. I'm not the only one. A lot of people went, what the hell is this? Seriously? 24 hours is all it took?
Yeah, and especially all the information that was out in the public.
Oh, there
We
was
were able
so
to
much.
digest we were able to digest a lot of that. Fifth Lauren basically dunked on him. If I can't remember who the exact guy was that they were accusing of all that stuff, but yeah, there was a ton of information for us to go through. I mean, that took us probably a decent amount of time. I mean, he put out a long tweet. I think he put out a video. So for a kind of an investigation, to take 24 hours on some pretty serious accusations, that was a little bit odd. I don't know. I feel like ESL will respond to this one. I think you're right. It might take a little bit longer than what I kind of originally said quickly, but I would hope at a minimum that they would have some sort of response like, hey, we're saying we're doing an investigation. Tell us what happened, unless you're hiding something, which I wouldn't expect them to do. But I don't understand why they wouldn't put out a release after announcing they put out some sort of investigation, unless they're just trying to maybe not tarnish the brand in some capacity. But I think they owe it to the public, to tell us what happened, what was going on.
Well, we saw the same thing also take place with the Faceit Major. There was a ruling put in place by Faceit in the rule book regarding multiple team ownership. But apparently that ruling, according to Faceit, came from Valve. They said that Valve told them to put that in the rulebook. You can see the online qualifiers for the Faceit Major. Here, we'll scroll down so you guys can read this too. We'll have an entry restriction rule stating that teams and players should not have any financial interest in the success of any team that they are competing against. Literally, this exact thing. Like this.
It's going on right now.
This happening right now. Like, how is that not... How is there no ruling from Valve here, or how is there no understanding of how this should be done? It's literally the exact same thing. A team or a player has an ownership or a stake in another team that is competing against them. That, to me, is very clear based on what we're reading right here.
Yeah, and this isn't just, one person, I guess in the case of Luripus, I mean, there might have been some other people that were involved with ENTS that might have had the same somewhat, kind of conflict of interest. But this is like 5 players and 2 teams, Get Right on Dignitas and, Dead and Taco and all the other players involved with So, yeah, they should look into us. I have a feeling there's probably a strongly worded email in ESL's mailbox from Valve right now.
Well, like, look at it from the side of Immortals Gaming Group. Immortals Gaming Group buys out Optic, and everyone's like, well, are they going to keep Optic? If you remember, there was like, no, they can't because of the conflict of interest. They can't have 2 teams. Yeah, and then there's, again, this one was Pro 100, with Zeus owning Pro 100 and playing for a different team. You had Refresh, which owned multiple teams simultaneously. Like, we can scroll down here so you guys can see what I'm talking about. But Refresh owned Astralis, Heroic, and Godsend, all teams competing at a high level, and they had to sort of figure out how that was going to work from a brand perspective by parceling out those businesses to separate businesses. And, like, it was clear based on what we read here that this is not allowed. So how all of a sudden is there an evaluation necessary, and why is it going to take time? In my mind, someone should just link this article to ESL and say, hey, this is why this can't be done. And then they should go, oh, yeah, you're right.
Oh, yeah. We've talked about this before. Yeah.
Yeah, this came up once, I think.
You guys remember this? But yeah, I mean, just going into it, like the companies like Refresh that hold a bunch of different companies under their umbrella company, like they have to know going into it when they're purchasing these companies or building them that conflict of interest is there, and they should have had some sort of game plan in place if they didn't already. I don't
Here's
know,
the thing. The game plan
you,
is building value and then selling the teams. So
yeah,
their game plan is not to create a highly competitive team. To a certain extent, it is. But a company like Refresh owns that many teams because the goal is to build as many valued teams as possible so that they can just sell them to the highest bidder. And like people probably don't want to admit that that's the case, but ultimately it is a business. So they're investing their money into a team to build a strong project, and then they're going to find some org who wants to get into Counter-Strike and sell them off for a pretty penny. And that's how they return their investment. That's how they make money. There's no money to be made in running 7 different Counter-Strike teams because 2 of them are going to be good and the other 5 are going to suck. It's just the reality. You can't invest top dollar into that many projects and expect it to pay out because they are competing against each other.
Yeah, I guess the only question is while they're building up those brands, when is that overlap going to happen when they end up playing against each other? It takes a while for those to get towards kind of like the top of semi-pro scene into the pro scene. So, how much thought did they put into it when they were building those brands? And, at what points were there those conflict of interest and how do they navigate around that? And obviously it came to a head at one point once everybody took notice of that. But yeah, no, you're totally right. I think those teams being shipped off and sold, I think was the goal once they started those brands all under the umbrella company.
It's the entire nature
They
of this
could have
business
just made
is
them
making money.
separate.
Yeah, they
Yeah,
could have. But they also know that there's no value in like running these teams long term. Like having multiple teams in the same game is ultimately just going to hurt your bottom line.
Yeah, especially with the amount of salary some of these players and teams are getting paid. I don't.
If you had to guess how much you think Counter-Strike players are making per month currently at a top level, what would you guess?
25K a month.
Yeah, you're right on par.
I think I remember hearing that specific number. That's why I said that.
That
I think it
specific
was
number
attached
has
to
come up.
Astralis or Navi, if I remember
Oh,
right.
there were players competing in North America for teams that were not very good, that were making $300,000 a year. Like
that's insane, man.
they were, and
That
now
is
to be fair,
insane.
the one player that I know of that was in this position was one of the best players in North America, but at the time was competing for a team that was not finding success. So yeah, if you're investing that much money into one player, imagine your salary across all 5, and then the coach.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
you're looking at
Coach, analyst.
well over $1 million. It's like $1.5 million probably total investment for your 5 players, the coach and the analyst, and then there's all the money you have to spend on their housing and all the money you're spending on equipment and
Managers.
I'm saying it's probably going to be close to like a $2 to $2.5 million investment to run a Counter-Strike team for a year at a top level. That's in North America. Obviously, that could change once you get overseas and you start talking about countries in Eastern Europe where cost of living is way lower and you can save some money there. But the salaries, the players are going to expect the same because what's going to keep that guy playing there? He could just go find a mixed nationality European roster or come to the U.S. and get way more money.
Get that check, yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're looking at significant cash sunk into a project. Can you really double down? Like, is there enough talent to justify that? And not only that, if you do build the number 1 and number 2 team in the world, all that's going to happen is they're going to play in the finals together and one team's going to get first and one team's going to get second. And I guess that's ultimately a good thing because you're getting first and second place prize money. But that's obviously just not going to happen. There's no way that is actually going to be the way that things break down because you're going to determine very early on that your number 1 team is really good and your number 2 team is not nearly as good. You might be lucky if they crack into the top 10.
Yeah, and then the question comes like, are you going to be swapping players in between teams? Like one's performing well, they're towards the top, but the team below it isn't performing as well, and you might swap a player for the lower team. Obviously, I don't know how much sense that would make, just because like the best team, you'd want to just keep them at the number 1, but you also want to help out the lower team. So yeah, there's a lot of conflict of interest with all of this that's going on. So I'm interested to see how it all plays out.
So I'm curious to see what ESL is going to say about this. They haven't really made any statements yet, so I guess we'll find out. But I don't know. Maybe you guys agree. Maybe you disagree. You guys can go ahead and let us know. You can hit us both up on social media. You can find me at Bach_TV on Twitter, and they can find you at MagicHelmet TV, or is it MagicHelmet_TV?
MagicHelmet TV, no underscore on
Oh
all
yeah, I got to get
social.
rid of that underscore. I'm tired of that underscore.
Yeah, I was able to grab all of the different social media ones. Just MagicHelmet TV. I had to add the TV, unfortunately, because some MagicHelmet was taken on a couple of them. So it works out. It looks nice and clean. But yeah, hit me up on Twitter, Instagram, MagicHelmet TV.
Facebook, MySpace, LiveJournal.
MySpace. Yeah, I
Yeah.
forgot MySpace.
What's the other one where it's
My
like
top eight. Who would make it?
just more blogs, whatever blogs you got. But yeah, that's going to be how we wrap things up here for the show, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed it. If you do, go ahead and hit that follow button. Follow us here. We'll also be uploading this to YouTube. It's Nerd Street Gamers, NERDST Gamers on YouTube. Make sure you find that and subscribe if you like the content that we're creating. And hopefully, we will see you guys next Friday, same time, same place for Door Stuck. Take care.